So I would highly recommend having a pair of piston pullers, which you can buy on Amazon. These help out a lot. Some brake cleaner. I recommend having brake cleaner, some silicone, .4 brake fluid, and rubber gloves. And a box of rags doesn't hurt either. If you're going to be taking the banjo bolt off, which we are when we rebuild the caliper, you're going to want to crack the banjo bolt while the caliper is still bolted on, just because you're not going to be able to hold the caliper and undo this when everything's unbolted. So all I do is give it a quick off and then back on, just a tiny bit, just hand tight, so that it doesn't leak fluid everywhere, but we'll be able to get it off later. These are just 14mm bolts. It should be easy peasy. Pop these two bad boys off. Get the caliper off. What I'm going to want to do is pump these pistons out as far as they can go without falling out while the system is bled. So making sure I have enough fluid in my reservoir. Make sure I have enough fluid in here, just because that's where it's going to be coming from when it's pumping the pistons out. Then I'm going to start pumping these bad boys out. What I'll even try to do is take this inner pad out so I can pump the pistons even farther and butt them up against this outer pad. And take this little clip out that's holding these pads in. Like that. Then I get the pin out, put that aside. Then what I can do is get this outside pad swung around. Take the inside pad out, put the outside pad back in, and let's see how far we can pump these pistons before they break the seal. Alright, sweet. So there you go, we got the pistons pumped out. I still have pressure, so that means they're sealing still with just one pad in there. I'm guessing that's about as far as we're going to be able to pump the pistons out. So what I'm going to do is be done with this caliper, go on to the next side. Before you unbolt the banjo bolts from the calipers, so you're separating the brake line from the caliper, before you take that bolt out, zip tie your brake lever. Doesn't have to be all the way to the bar, but just zip tie your brake lever, and then all the fluid that's in the reservoir won't spill out while you're taking the banjo bolt off, which is good. Makes less of a mess. So my brake lever is zip tied. We loosened this before, so it's not that tight. Pop that bad boy off. And this is always going to make a tiny bit of a mess. Just do it as fast as you can. Get the banjo bolt out. Set the caliper down. And then what I like to do is take a rag. Put the rag through the banjo fitting like this. Because then while it's sitting here, and we're working on the caliper, it's not leaking all over the place, making a mess. So just leave that like that. That's good to go. So when the caliper comes off, you're going to have two crush washers, one on either side of the banjo fitting that's on the brake line. So you're going to have a crush washer against the banjo bolt and a crush washer on the caliper side. Make sure not to lose these. You can use new ones, but if they're not damaged, you can reuse them. It's not the biggest deal. So we'll save those guys. First thing we're going to do is pull this bracket out. So this bracket should just pull like this and pop out of the top there and the bottom boot. So we don't have my piston pulling tool. You can see I can just wiggle this guy out. It's pretty tough. You got to make sure your pistons are all the way on the edge of that square seal. But if you do have a piston tool, which I recommend investing in, it's much easier. This guy just goes in here like this, give it a good grip, and it's easy if you just spin it a little bit when it's coming out, and boom, she's out. Just flip that guy over, let it drain for a second. So this is where it's easier if you have a pick tool like this. So in the two caliper bores, you can see there's a big seal in a groove. This is the square seal, that's what holds pressure in, and there's a smaller seal that just basically keeps crud out. It's called the dust seal. If you can get your pick in there on the square seal and just kind of dig it around the back, try not to scratch anything, boom, that joker pops right out. Do the same thing for the other square seal. And the dust seals, which will be sometimes are a little tricky because they're so thin and they'll have crud in there. But it is their job to keep crap out. So that's where a lot of your dirt and brake grime will sit. So good, pulled those bad boys out. Is use a little brake cleaner, and actually these pistons look pretty nice, but I'll use a little bit of brake cleaner, clean these guys up just with shop rags or even like the rough side of a sponge. You don't want to use sandpaper or anything like that on a piston. You want this surface to stay as smooth as possible, and I would worry about sandpaper taking the finish off of that. You can also take out the pad spring if you want. Take a look at it, make sure it's not bent funny or anything. You'll have some wear marks like this on here. The pad spring should come right out with a screwdriver like that. Then you can clean under there. And if you are using a pick like this and you see some grime in there, you might be tempted to kind of gouge around in there to get that crap out of those grooves. But keep in mind, this is a steel pick and this is aluminum caliper casting. So just be careful. You can pick out a little bit of the stuff, but you don't want to scratch these surfaces. These are sealing surfaces. Well, this one is. Alright, so I cleaned up everything. I want the pistons to look like this. I basically got all the crap off the pistons. You can see they got a good shine. There's a little bit of marking on there, but that's not crud on the piston. That's just like a wear mark on there. That looks fine. If you have any like deep gouges or stuff you can't get off with only a sponge and brake cleaner, then you might want to think about getting new pistons, but these look fine for the most part. I got the calipers all cleaned up best I can. Depending on how old they are, you might have more junk in there. So the next thing to do is get your seals out. So you'll have 2 square seals in your rebuild kit and 2 dust seals. Now, I can't stress this enough. I'll put the link for the part in the description, but buy genuine Suzuki parts, okay? You don't want to buy aftermarket rebuild kits with aftermarket seals. Even if the Suzuki part is a little bit more, buy the OEM seal. A lot of R&D goes into these seals and dimensions and stuff like that. You don't want junk in your calipers, especially for something like brakes. So what you do, put the seals out, just put a little bit of brake fluid on them. Basically, you just want to get them lubed up a little bit. Then you're going to take your caliper, and what I like to do is just find the groove with one edge, like that. So this edge is in the right groove, and then you can just kind of roll. Then you can just kind of roll the rest of it in like that. It'll snap in. Don't worry, you can't twist it in there. You would have to really try to put it in twisted. They want to drop right in. So same with the other side. So I lay it on top like that. You get one into the groove, and you can't put them in the wrong groove either. These are too fat to go into the top groove. And if it pops out, that's fine. So just get it started. Get it started like that, and then when it's almost in, you should be able to just push and bam, snaps in. So it should be, if you look down the bore, they should be hard to notice, then you know they're the right size. The exact same thing with the dust seal. Dust seals are a little bit easier to go in. They should be a little looser in the groove. So boom. These are a little bit easier to get in twisted, so just be careful that they're not twisted. Take a quick look, but it's not that big of a deal. So same thing with this guy. Pop that bad boy in. So the pistons get a little bit of brake fluid on there, just like that, and then they should get it centered in the bore, and boom, should go right in. So the other piston, get a little brake fluid on there, push it into the bore. Make sure it's going in square. Even if it's crooked, it'll kind of center itself like that, and give it a like that. I can feel it's a little cockeyed, but you should be able to just fix it. And if you can't fix it, just pull it out a little bit, like this guy. Doesn't want to go in now. So if that's the case, just get your tool again, spin it a little bit, try again. There we go. So sometimes you have to mess with it a little bit. If you feel binding or scratching or rubbing or any not nice feeling while they're going in, something's probably installed incorrectly. We'll put our pad spring back in. So you take the one prong side, prongs go up, and the single prong goes towards the pistons. It should be pretty easy. Just snap that in like that. That's just to hold the pads tight. And then what we're going to do, you'll notice we didn't clean off this bracket, and these two pins that are installed into the boots should be covered in some kind of grease. If they're not, then you're going to grease them up. I just have this like Napa lubricating compound. It doesn't really matter what kind of lube you have, just some kind of thick grease. Go ahead and put a little splooge of that on each of the pins, like that. You just want some grease in there so it can slide. So those are nice and lubed up. Fat pin goes in the bigger hole. You won't be able to install this any other way than the correct way, so just line up those pins and boots, and that should slide right in. Ready to put the pads back in the right side caliper. So we take the inside pad, looks like this guy. Remember, if we have one of those stainless steel clips for the back of this, we'll pop that on right now. Otherwise, I don't, not a big deal. This pad fits in just like that. You can see this ear over here goes in first on that ledge. Then we push up against the spring. Other side comes in on that hole. Put this bad boy in just like that. Now, I cleaned off my pad pin just with some brake cleaner. Make sure it looks okay. A little bit of wear on there. Nothing I'm worried about yet. So, pop that joker in. Get our hole lined up so we can get our clip in there. It's hard to see, but line that guy up, push it in. You probably need a pliers or something to push that guy on. You want to make sure you get it all the way installed. So you might want to make sure when that pin is going on, you can see there's kind of two steps. Don't get tricked and think that it's installed when it's just like this. You got to push it one more time and get it clipped in like that. That's fully installed. It scares me a little bit that that little clip is the only thing holding this pin in, and this pin is the only thing holding my pads in. So what I do as a little extra factor of safety is I take some silicone, any kind works fine. I take my silicone and I put a blob on here. I put a blob of silicone on the end there, just so that when that dries, even if that clip falls out, I have another level of safety. Okay, so then we're ready to put our caliper onto the bike. So what we're going to do first is mount it back to the fork leg. So make sure the pads are on either side of the rotor, like that. They're good. Get our mounting bolts, line them up. So we'll get these guys started, and as you can see, I have the bike labeled. Front caliper is 28 foot-pounds, but just to make sure, front brake caliper mounting bolt is 28 foot-pounds. So once these two mount bolts are basically more than hand tight, we'll set our torque wrench, give those suckers a torque, double check them. Good. I put the crush washers on here, so we have two crush washers. One will go on top of the fitting, one will go on the bottom of the fitting. So get this out of here. So we have one crush washer on the top. Get our crush washer on the bottom. And there's a little groove in the caliper here where the brake line goes through. like that. Then we'll get that guy started. So we'll get it hand tight. Brake hose union bolt is 16.5 foot-pounds. Give it a double check. Okay, these two bolts are torqued. The banjo bolt is torqued. Do the same on the other side. Bleed her up, and you're good to go.